It never ceases to amaze me that in this online era when being first means you're the best and being second means you're last, that game journalists always end up being last when it comes to covering a topic, it seems. Every so often, we actually get nuggets of truth from gaming journalists, and it's kind of interesting to see when it happens. 2024 has been a year where they have openly been admitting that there are problems in the gaming industry, and there are problems when it comes to the AAA gaming world. Well, today's article is one that actually finally says the thing that, well, most YouTubers have been saying for years. In fact, I've covered a lot of this recently in the past few months. Dating back to October, I think I've done 3 or 4 videos talking about how the gaming industry is releasing too many busted and broken games and what they can do to fix it. And yet, today from PC Gamer, we finally get the realization from Joshua Wollens writing over there. So, the money men are getting complacent in our incredibly online era. Too many games released, busted, broken, and basically in early access this year. It's time for it to stop. Oh boy, don't get too rowdy there. All right, it's the era of the comeback. No Man's Sky, Cyberpunk 2077, Fallout 76, and on the list goes. Games that had god-awful launches but pulled it back from the brink over the course of patches and expansions. Games that started out as player-repelling PR disasters and ended up beloved golden boys. In some cases, the studios behind them end up with better reputations than they would have done if they'd just released a functional game at the beginning. But I'm calling it enough. We're done. It's really funny to see language like this written out when there are so many channels on YouTube that have been calling out this exact practice for years. It shouldn't be that games are releasing busted and broken and then over the course of years slowly getting fixed over the course of time, which could actually be a viable business strategy from what we've seen in the past and from the games that, well, Joshua here just listed. But he goes on to say, from now on, we're only releasing games that are actually complete. And by we, I mean you, the imaginary publisher reading this. The whole phenomenon has become alarmingly common, with games both big and small releasing pre-term and having to be brought up to snuff long after we've already dropped $60 on them. Yeah, it was interesting. If you guys remember back in the day when games weren't fixed prices at like 60, when games had a variable pricing in the stores, that's right, some games were 20, some games were 15, some games were 40, whatever. But the $5 games, those games were busted, broken, and just hot garbage. If you guys remember that, if you're old enough to remember those days, yeah, I just called you out. You're old. But I guess also that means that I'm old too. But it's really interesting paying $60 as a practice and getting a broken game or something that's half functional, something that doesn't work, something that doesn't fulfill what gaming should be, is a conversation that has been being had. And it's so interesting to me that PC Gamer is this late to the party. Maybe they've released other articles very similar to this, but this is the one where the language was very pointed, or at least pointed enough that I thought it was interesting to cover. Okay. Metal Gear Solid Master Collection Volume 1 became what it always should have been last September, nearly a year after release. The GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition began looking like a GTA approximately a month ago. Will Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection ever recover from probably one of the worst launches of all time? Maybe with a few more patches if it ever gets them. So, what I find so interesting is I keep up with a lot of gaming news, a lot of gaming business news, and just gaming industry in general from a lot of the channels that I follow. Whether they're just commentators, whether they're reviewers, whether they are people that go into and they look at the business practices and go over the stock markets and the trades and all that with what's happening with these companies. This is a conversation that's been long had on YouTube forever. And it's really funny that I think for the longest time, journalists thought that, oh, just those silly YouTubers, they don't know what they're talking about, but yet those silly YouTubers pull in numbers that these journalists only wish that they could do. In fact, I would argue that the reason that these journalists probably still even get a lot of viewership at all, or to go read articles and stuff like that, is because of the YouTubers, because people say, no, I want to make sure that this is in context of what's going on here. And yet, finally, finally, after the 2 years of people online saying gaming journalism is done, it's over, it's bunk. The journalists are the YouTubers, have been the YouTubers, and the industry just doesn't have the money to float them anymore. And people like, people like Luke Stevens or Legendary Drops or even Bellular News or God knows how many of the freaking Asmongold, all these other people, they could basically finance themselves. They drop a video, it gets millions of views, they share their thoughts on it, which is basically what gaming journalism is, and then they move on with their day and make another video about another topic. It's such an easier business model. And these journalists are finally going, wait a minute, maybe all these YouTube channels out there, maybe they're actually tapped in to the audience. Well, yeah, no kidding. Just look at the viewership on the channels. This is a day late and a dollar short. Gaming journalism is dead. And the reason that I say gaming journalism, specifically traditional journalism, through the magazines and the trash rags online that you see, like, PC Gamer here, the reason that it's dead and the thing that we're going to see more is because the audience was with all the YouTube channels. The audience was with people who actually cared to look into things, to do research, to find stuff, or to even just commentate it with a perspective that you haven't quite heard before. And more, as you start to see it die, what you're going to start to see in its final death throes, and its final last war cry before it hits the deck, is gaming journalism is going to return, or at least on these magazines, to what it used to be. Sharing thoughts and opinions that seem to align with a lot of gamers. But sadly, it's too little and too late. They've already buried themselves. They've already deviated from gaming culture so much and aligned themselves, a lot of cases, with political culture or just with, the games industry instead of the audience that they should have been aligned with the whole time. And so, no matter how many articles they write like this, I don't think they'll ever get the trust back. It doesn't matter if they say, we're finally done. We agree with what the gamers have been saying for years now, only because, we realize we kind of need their money because the venture capital is dried up. It's really interesting to see this. I saw this article and I thought it would be something interesting to talk about. And yet, as the death throes of games journalists dies in this form, we already have new games journalism in video format on YouTube and on other places out there that do it. So, thank you all so much for checking out A Drink with Crazy. I do appreciate all of you being here. If you guys care to share, let me know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. Also, I got merch. Go check out the merch. There's links down below. There's some fun designs. I'm going to come up with new designs. I'm going to make one for those who have hearing loss. It's really funny because I have hearing loss. It's going to be great. Thanks for checking out the videos, guys. And until next time, cheers, everybody.